This is Manchester United's Greatest Games, a series that's dedicated to the greatest games in Manchester United history. I'm Wayne Barton, your host. I'm joined by long-standing United fans and authors Roy Cavanagh and David Blatt, who are joining me to talk about United's greatest games in history. We are going to go through this series picking the greatest games for different reasons, all of which we will explain in due course. But straight up, to launch this little episodic series, we're going to talk about what is the straight out greatest game in United history, and we'll have a selection. We're going to explain why that's our selection, and we'll choose our own context for that selection. Now, the greatest game in Manchester United history, there's a little bit of a spoiler on screen for Roy's choice. Roy, you've gone with the 1963 FA Cup final. So, without any delay, explain to the listeners and the viewers why you believe that this is the greatest game in United history.
Thanks, Wayne, and great to be alongside you and Dave for this little mini-series. The 1963 FA Cup final against Leicester City at Wembley Stadium was a pivotal moment for Manchester United. That's why I've chosen it. It was 5 years after the Munich air disaster and the club's first trophy in those 5 years. The whole season was a massive, interesting season, 1962-3. It saw the arrival of the iconic, truly iconic Dennis Law and the equally rabid Manchester United man in the end, Pat Crerand. Dennis Law, in my opinion, is one of the two most significant signings in Manchester United's history in my lifetime, which goes back to 1947, although 1955 for watching the Reds. Because Dennis Law and the other man I rate in that category, Eric Cantona, not only changed the team, they changed the whole club, they changed the life of the supporters. They made us Manchester United again. And Dennis had arrived in the August of 1962. And it was a weird season, really, because Dennis arrived and Bobby Charlton disappeared for 3 months because he got hurt in the 1962 World Cup in Chile, playing for England. So we had Law arrived and Charlton didn't play till the end of October. We had a dicky start to the season. Bobby arrived, soon got into the swing of things, and by Christmas time, we were looking as though we were going to be a decent side. And then the weather intervened. From Boxing Day 1962 to the beginning of March 1963, there was virtually no football whatsoever. United played on Boxing Day away at Fulham, and their next game was at the end of February when Paddy Crerand actually signed for United. So the FA Cup run for 62-3 should have started in January 1963 and actually started in the first week of March 1963. The first game was against Huddersfield Town, which was quite ironic because obviously Dennis was an Huddersfield Town player, and my hero, Ray Wood, was actually in Huddersfield Town goal that night. It was played on a Monday night, and United won comfortably 5-0, Dennis scoring an hat-trick. Such was the fixture congestion, though, that the following round, the fourth round, was played the following Monday night, at home again, this time against Aston Villa, and United won through 1-0 thanks to an Albert Quicksall goal. And immediately on the Saturday, the fifth round tie was played against Chelsea, again at Old Trafford. Chelsea then flying high in the second division under Tommy Docherty, and they produced very tough opposition. Again, it was 2-1, a close score to United, which put us in the sixth round, and we were drawn away against the then third division Coventry City, with the match taking place at Coventry's ground. Now, Coventry were resurrected under Jimmy Hill, and they were really flying. They'd knocked a couple of good sides out. And so from March the 5th to something like March the 20th, United were about to play their fourth cup tie of this season. I always remember it, absolutely chucked it down. And being a showman as he was, Jimmy Hill, he'd brought Ken Dodd on a big stage in the middle of the pitch for pre-match entertainment, and it was absolutely bucketing down. Coventry went 1-up, but United won through 3-1, a couple of goals from Charlton, and another goal from Quicksall, who by then had scored in the third, fourth, fifth and sixth round. This put us into the semi-final at Villa Park, 70,000 against second division Southampton. And poor game, but we won through. Trademark Dennis goal, there he was poaching. We won the game 1-0, played in all white, and we just looked the part. I mean, Law looked $1 million. He just looked like a film star. We were entering the swinging 60s, of course, by this time, and he just looked the part. Blonde hair, and the kit looked as though it was made particularly for him. And so we were off to Wembley. And I must admit, I travelled in style. It was a month before my 16th birthday, and I'd been working 12 months at the time, having left school just after my 15th birthday. And I went with the local news agent. It was my first time into the London area, and he did it in style. And we went on a Pullman train from Manchester in the morning, big breakfast, and the train stopped like at Wembley Station. Saw the game, which I'll get to in a minute, and we came back and had a lovely evening meal. So I certainly went there in style. And United were just different class. If you think that 2 weeks before the cup final, we'd played a game, another pivotal game, away to City at Main Road. And basically, if we'd have lost, we could seriously have gone down. But we scraped, and I mean scraped, a 1-1 draw, which actually sent City down and kept us up. But on paper, we had such a really good side. For most of the season, Harry Gregg was in goal. Tony Dunn, of course, was a marvellous fullback. Noel Cantwell was captain. Maurice Setters was in the team. Billy Foulkes. Paddy Creran, who could only play in the cup by the 6th round, I think, because he was cup tied. Johnny Giles out on the right wing. Albert Quicksall inside. David Hurd, a great centre forward. Dennis at 10, and Bobby Charlton on the left wing. So on paper, we had a really good, strong side, but we hadn't delivered in the league. And it seemed because of this congested season, truncated season, which had stopped at one point on Boxing Day and started again at the beginning of March, the cup seemed to take the appetite of the players, and the league form just disintegrated. And as I say, we got this scrappy draw at City, which sent them down. But at Wembley, they played as the players should play. And all 11 of them were quite majestic. Law and Creran in particular. But an unheralded man from Manchester United history, David Hurd. I mean, what we would give today for David Hurd. Wow. He would be Maradona, Law, Puskas, Di Stefano, Georgie Best, the whole lot in one. I mean, 20 goals, he would think he had a bad season. A great team player and a great centre forward. Dennis scored a marvellous goal against Gordon Banks, who was in the Leicester City goal that day. We were 1-0 up, and Leicester had actually finished up runners-up in the league to Liverpool. So they were a really good side that season, but we were majestic. I mean, Law just exuded confidence. I don't like saying strutting, but he commanded presence. Charlton, of course, in the team, and Paddy Creran really showing why Busby wanted him to play for United. Hurd put us 2-0 up, and it looked relatively confident. I wouldn't say complacency set in, but Leicester did score late on, but immediately David Hurd scored another goal. to complete the 3-1 victory. The only downside, in a way, for real aficionados of United was that Harry Gregg had suffered an injury just before the semi-final. And I know Harry felt he was fit to play in the final, but Busby stuck with Dave Gaskell in goal. And it was sad that yet again Harry had the misfortune of missing out when anything was being presented trophy-wise for Manchester United. But there we were. The victory lifted United. And from the following season, and of course for the next 5 seasons, we won 2 league titles and finished up in '68 winning the European Cup. But the pivotal moment, so one of the greatest games in United's history, was winning the FA Cup of 1963, 3-1 against Leicester City.
Yeah, perfectly said that, Roy. I watched that game again recently, and the movement from Crerand. I mean, if you ever wanted a sort of a lesson in the difference that Crerand and Lowe made to that team, it's summed up in Lowe's goal. The way that Crerand seizes the ball, bombards through a couple of challenges, plays it across, and Lowe's finish, his execution is incredible. There's a moment, I
Yes.
think it's either just after that or just before it, where Lowe. There's an even better move where Lowe goes around 4 or 5 players. He's just the dribbling ability is like a knife through butter. He plays a 1-2 with
Yeah,
somebody,
yeah,
gets on the end of it, rounds the goalkeeper. It's the side netting, and yeah, it would have
yes,
been an
yes,
incredible cup final goal, but didn't go in. But United,
yeah,
go on to win the game, and like you said, the first trophy after Munich, which was so symbolic in sort of how it framed Busby's rebuild, because like you said, there'd been this attempt to get a goal scorer, which Hurd had fulfilled, and then there was that dynamism and electricity that they needed in a forward player. Obviously, he brought it
yeah,
in Dennis Lowe, and that would get added to in a couple of years.
yeah,
Well, not even a couple of years, in a few
yeah,
months after that from George Best. So, a really
yeah.
symbolic day. David, you've gone for a game itself, which in terms of the occasion is obvious, but the game itself isn't, because anyone who watches that back, actually, there's 2 threads, narrative threads. The first one is that United got battered for 90 minutes against Bayern Munich, but if you watch it back, actually, they don't get battered. I mean, yeah, all right, Bayern have the grasp on it for a long period of time, but United really gave them a run in the second half. They created a lot of chances, even though Bayern got a few on the counter. So tell me why you've gone for 1999, the Champions League
But
final,
there was
Manchester
so
United 2, Bayern
there
Munich
was,
1.
yeah, there were so many to choose from, but I had to go for that one. You have to understand, I was at Wembley on May the 29th, 1968. I was 19 years old, and I saw us beat Benfica 4-1. And I imagined the glory years ahead of me. How was I to know that from that moment onward, we would go down? I remember quotes a few years after, I think it was George Best saying, the club, they'd done it, they'd reached their pinnacle, and the edge went off. And George felt that they weren't as focused in reproducing that success. Anyway, it went down. So I suffered 31 years of foreplay before May the 26th, 1999. I'd watched Liverpool win everything, a bit of lead. Even my London mates had won things, and it hurt. But football mirrors life. You have to go through the bad to appreciate the good. So this was building up. And when we finally made it to the final, see, in the 80s, I'd gone to a lot of United AGMs, and I'd licked and grovelled with the board. Once the media had left, I'd shake hands with everybody, including, amongst others, the secretary. Now, it wasn't Les Olive, it was the guy that took over from Les Olive, but I was a face to be known. I was a bit of an oink. I would stand up and say things I didn't like at the age they didn't like. But anyway, after this particular AGM, the one after we qualified for the new camp, I went up to Les Olive and I made some excuse to talk, any chance of a ticket. And he just said, write to me. Now, I went home and I thought of a strategy. If I ask for 2, he won't give me any. But if I made a good case for 8, he might give me 6. So I went in at the top. And believe it or not, and in my book, I detail every story. But in the end, I did get 6 tickets at face value. Even to this day, some of my red mates owe me for what I could have sold them for a fortune, but that's not the way I thought. You had to be there. I mean, the 3 most important words you can say to anybody on the planet: I love you. No. I was there. You can watch things on TV, video, the cinema. Nothing beats being there. So I had to do it. Got my tickets. Cockney Red. So we left on the Tuesday morning from the flat about 5 o'clock in the morning in London. I remember we all gathered at my house. We had a people carrier, 7 there with flags and bums out the window, whatever. And my wife said, look, it's 6 in the morning. Don't make a sound. So of course, as soon as we got in the car, horns, United, and so on. We're on our way. Dover, all through France. Got to a friend of a friend's house in Barcelona who had a flat. So luckily I was able to park the van without taking the stickers off. And we made our way to the ground. Now, if you remember, if you were a Bayern fan, you went straight from the local metro station to the ground. But with United, they made us walk 3/4 away round the houses till we finally got there. And when we got to the top of the hill, there was rows and rows of police, special forces. And one of the mates in the car, his ticket was waiting at the ticket office, but they wouldn't let him go through. So all that way in all those years, and he was denied entry, he couldn't pick up his ticket. Think about that. Anyway, we went through all the barriers, got to outside the stadium, and the organisation was awful. It made me think of Hillsborough, actually. There were police on horses knocking people about. I remember there was one father with 2 kids. He was so worried about what happened to his kids. He walked away. He turned away from the queue, walked away. All that he'd been through, he was almost as old as me, but he had to give it up. That's how bad it was getting in. The crush outside. Now, we all remember the game itself. Roy said we weren't as bad as it's made out. It was like a game too far. I was at Wembley for the Newcastle game, a matter-of-fact game. I mean, it meant a lot, but we were never in danger. But this seemed to be a game too far, because often for English teams, in English teams, we play more games in the Premiership than anyone in Europe, 2 cup competitions, whatever, domestic and the European one. The players were mentally and physically a bit gone. And also, no schools, no clean. So it was difficult. The team played in patches. United fans who took up 3/4 of the stadium, we chanted in patches. But then about 15 minutes towards the end, and we could have been 3-0 down, if you remember, the overhead kick by, was it Skirtle against the bar? Could have been 3-0 down. We started making substitutions. And for the first time in the game, you saw little gaps starting to appear. A scuff shot, I think, by York. But at least we got the shot in. And you had a feeling. And of course, we all know what happened at the end. You know, in many ways, there's a scuff shot by Giggs and a scuff shot by Sheringham following it in. 1-1. I went bananas. I screamed like you haven't heard. It was just a noise. It's just a noise. And then 2 minutes later, Ollie. This now was a primeval scream. I couldn't explain it. I haven't done it before. It was a build-up of those 31 years of foreplay of missing out all the other quarterfinals and semi-finals in the Champions League that we never failed to get past, Bayern, Leverkusen, you name them. This was it, you know, and unbelievable. And then the celebrations at the end. We stayed in what? 3/4 an hour after the game. The players individually came, lifted up the cup, did little runs or whatever. It was a moment to be cherished. I knew in myself, this will never be repeated. Oh yeah, we may win it again, but 31 years of waiting, I knew it would never be the same. In the end, came outside the ground singing, chanting, made our way near my mate's apartment. There was a bar, so of course we watched the highlights in the bar again with fellow Reds. Got into my people carrier, and about 2 a.m, drove in pitch black to the first Formula One one-star hotel in France, where we stayed the night for a few hours. Woke up, drove all the way across France to get to Calais for the ferry in the evening. We arrived at the ferry port, only United then. This was my dream. I'd seen so many times on TV, fans in Europe, but in South America with flags, cars with horns, women on the roof, whatever. Now it was our turn. And the noise, I can't tell you, just waiting to go on. Then you drove into the hold of the ferry. Of course, it's all metal, all steel. And the sound reverberated back off the walls. The noise was incredible. But by the time we got on board the ferry, it was like a war zone. There were just dead bodies everywhere. Everybody kind of, and you saw them flaked out everywhere. Anyway, got to the other side, drove home, got home about 2 o'clock in the morning. A couple of my mates were flagged out, and I said, come on, my wife's recorded it. Shall we watch it again? Yeah, let's watch it again. So we watched it all the way through. Finally went to bed, took my trousers down, and my wife said, what's that? You been in a fight? No, what you on about? Look at the back of your legs. I didn't realise, well, everybody was there. We'd stood on our seats, these plastic seats. We'd rocked to and forth, and the back of the plastic seat had dug into my legs, and I had bruise marks right from my ankle up to my thighs. It was quite a sight. But that was the, I remember on the fans forum afterwards, we were all putting our stories in, and there were some young kids, not young, but they were saying, I had my exams at uni, I couldn't afford to miss it. And I'm thinking, this game was different. You can always reset your exams next year. You'll never have this experience next year. So for me, that was the greatest 3 days, 2 nights of my life.
Fantastic stuff. That I think David. Next time we'll ask him to select a greatest game that doesn't include 30 years of foreplay, because the image is quite striking. But yeah, great stuff. That, and yeah, for different reasons, I can understand. Yeah, it was, unfortunately I wasn't there, but yeah, the I was there element of that, and I know the games in past series, something that I've been there for other great moments, and yeah, there's nothing quite like being there. I wasn't there for the 1999 FA Cup semi-final, so I didn't get the opportunity to have 3 days and 2 nights of extended foreplay like David, nor did I get a train journey in style like Roy. But I do remember the game, the 1999 FA Cup semi-final, which is just a few weeks before the final, the European Cup final, obviously, which is my selection for the greatest game in United history. I think there are cases for the two that the gents have put forward, as well as Blackpool 48 and Anderlecht 56. Both of those have made the top of Matt Busby's list for perfection in terms of what his team achieved for him. Red Star 58 and Sheffield Wednesday 58, either side of the crash, as quintessential United games for different reasons. Obviously, Benfica 68, like David talked about, and Real Madrid in the semi-final just before that. Really massive games in United history. And a week after this game, because I'm talking about the semi-final replay, not the semi-final, the first game, we played Juventus in the semi-final second leg as well, and it's mad to me. We think like you had two of the greatest games in the club's history in the space of a week, and these were really, really high quality games. And the other games I've listed for different reasons, but the Arsenal and Juventus games really stand out because of how close we were in terms of competition to the opponents that we were playing against. First of all, Juventus had been this European education that United were facing. throughout the 90s, in the same way that Busby Babes had done with Real Madrid in the 50s. Unfortunately, they'd not had the opportunity to overcome that. I do remember in '98 when everyone was talking about the 40th anniversary of the Munich celebration, you had the likes of Blanchflower and Bill Folks. They were talking about the '99 team and saying, well, they're getting to do what we never got to do, which I thought was really poetic. But that was the Juventus game. A week earlier, United played Arsenal in the Cup. At the semi-final replay, United should never have even been in this game. It's the best disallowed goal in United history that Giggs skins Diggs and the linesman decides it's offside for some reason, even though he's gone and got his own pass. Crosses and Roy Keane scores. It gets disallowed for offside for some reason, and they play this replay. Now, Wenger and Ferguson rotate their sides, and it still ends up in a game that's got everything. Arsenal give it as good as they've got. It's a game where Arsenal are on top of theirs as well. They've just won the double. Really, really close to United. They've got a lot of frightening weapons in there. United take the lead through the greatest goal nobody ever talks about, David Beckham from long range against Seaman. Arsenal equalise. There's a penalty in the last minute when Phil Neville brings down Ray Parlour. Roy Keane's already been sent off by this point. Peter Schmeichel, as we can see in the graphic there, celebrates a penalty save. In fact, he's celebrating at the end there, but he celebrates the penalty save from Dennis Bergkamp. And in extra time, they're still going for it. Alpha Leather and Ryan Giggs receives this pass from Patrick Vieira on the halfway line, scores a goal that only he can. Probably only he in world football at the time could score a goal like that. Ronaldo, the Brazilian, won another one. But certainly in terms of British players, Giggs the only one. He goes through all of those players and scores this great goal, possibly the greatest goal in FA Cup history, the greatest goal in United history, and one of the greatest goals in history itself. And for it to take place at the end of such an incredible game, the sort of cherry on the icing of this game is the thing that makes it stand out as the greatest game for me. The full game is available on YouTube. I think the full game, maybe all of these games that we spoke about, are available on YouTube. If they are, I'll put them on the description in the comments. Just an incredible game of football, and also the momentum that came from that. Because if you look back at the results for that season, you would get this sort of illusion that Arsenal struggled mentally after that they sort of stumbled and they couldn't. That's why they didn't win the league. But that's not the case. Arsenal won almost all the games after that, which showed their mental resilience at the time, not like the bottling that they would get renowned for these days. But they kept United honest. They fought all the way to the last game. A great Arsenal team and a great United team, and I think the sort of the fine margins, the narrow margins of that, and the things that are great players pushing others to be great, possibly the greatest clash ever between those sides as well. And we're speaking on Monday the 10th of March, a day after United played Arsenal in a pretty tepid league game, 1-1, and Sky Sports were billing it as the game that this has all been building to. Well, I beg to differ on that one. I'd probably say the 99 one was that, apart from a couple of notable rivalries after that with Keane and Vieira. But the sort of pinnacle of that rivalry came in that match, and the quality of United's football and the way that United got momentum from that moment. It felt as though they'd go on and achieve big things that season, and they did. As obviously is noted in David's story of United, how they won the treble, and obviously going back a little bit earlier, Roy's story about United coming back after Munich and that really romantic and poetic clash there with Leicester City to win the FA Cup in 1963, first trophy after Munich. Those are our selections, guys. Do you disagree with any of them? Tell us in the comments what we've got wrong. Tell us if you were at those games, if you agree with them. Give us your own selections if you've got something a bit different. We'll be back next week to talk about a different strand of what United's greatest games will be. Maybe we'll talk about the greatest comebacks in United history, or United's greatest ever game from a youth team perspective. We'll be back next week to talk about that. In the meantime, get commenting, get subscribing, and let us know your thoughts.